progress.
You members of the media, let me first of all welcome you to this very important statement we are going to make in this short but important media conference, and also thank you for coming to cover this event. This morning we want to show you the media, inform the public of a very important development between two very important trade unions. That is the Alfiers Workers Trade Union here in Trinidad and Tobago and the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union in Guyana. And I'll tell you why those two unions are so important based on the activity that I'm going to announce henceforth. But first of all, I want to introduce here this morning the representatives, top representatives of the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union. In the name of, first of all, the President, Comrade C. Paul Marine, and covered with this indicate by raising their hand. Comrade Anslim Singh, the General Secretary of GAWU. Comrade Purandat Narain, Assistant General Secretary. Comrade Gordon Thomas, Executive Committee Member. Comrade Julius Mills, Executive Committee Member. And Comrade Michael Blackman, General Council member, all members of the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union. Now, why that union is so important at this time, because that is the union that has taken on the responsibility, the only union in Guyana that is organizing the oil and gas workers in Guyana. And therefore, that's why I said it is like OWTU and OWTU in Trinidad and Tobago. And what the OWTU would have gotten involved in many, many years ago, many decades ago, back in the early 20s and 30s and 40s and so on, and throughout the development of the oil industry in Trinidad and Tobago, that is the journey, that is the task that this union is now embarking upon. And that we, the OWTU and GAWU, the Guyana Agricultural Workers Union, we have always shared a relationship, a fraternal relationship, a good relationship between that union and our union, the OWTU. And that's simply because we are a working class oriented union, they too, and our organization, both organizations have always maintained that workers ought to be central to national and regional development, that people ought to be central to the development of any sector. And therefore it stands to reason that the recent development of the oil and gas sector in Guyana, that they would turn to their brother union for advice and counsel and support and direction, and of course training and development assistance really in how to best have their workers, the people who are from Guyana, benefit from the resources of the land. And therefore, I only want to remind everybody, whether they choose to admit it or not, that this country was developed primarily on the backs and shoulders of workers in the oil and gas sector. On the backs and shoulders, the strength and the energy of those workers from the very earlier times to today, who would have worked in that sector, risking their lives and limbs and so on, to put food on the table, to be the breadbasket for the country. And therefore, that is why the OWTU would have sought to ensure that those workers get the best representation, to be able to get the best type of benefits for those who produce the wealth. It wasn't an easy task. It still is not an easy task, because today there is an attempt to roll back all of those benefits. But we are saying that the workers who are the ones responsible for turning the wheels of the economy, and therefore those workers ought to share, ought to benefit substantially. And we maintain that. And so too, we give our overwhelming support to our brothers, our brother union in Guyana, to ensure that, like us, over a very quick period of time, that the workers will benefit from the wealth of the country, not just the multinationals. Because may I remind you that the OWTU would have dealt with all of the multinationals in their past forms and in their recent incarnations and so on. We would have dealt with them. So we know about the BP, the Amoco, the BP Amoco, the British Gas, the Shell from earlier times. Shell has returned. We know also about the, well, we now have BPTT, the Texacos, the Textrins and so on. All of those oil companies, those multinationals, in various forms, going and coming to our shores, taking the resources of our land, and if we are not careful, would pauperize and leave our citizens no better. And that is the experience we do not want to befall our Guyana brothers and sisters. That all of those wealth would have been extracted, and the Guyanese people would be no better. And so that is why we want to share our experience with those comrades, to ensure that in the quickest possible time they get the benefit of that very important sector. We okay? Are we okay?
We're okay. Oh, okay. We're good.
Thank you very much. So I was saying that we would have dealt with the multinationals, we would have dealt with those major international corporations whose only effort is to come to our shores, both come to the shores of Trinidad and Tobago, or what they describe as third world countries, extract the wealth and take it to their country of origin and leave the citizens as poor as they can leave them. And that is what we want to correct. That is what we would have corrected, and building standards here in Trinidad and Tobago. Let me just say at this point, if today there are standards within industry, it came about as a result of the standards set by the Oilfields Workers Trade Union coming from the oil industry. And everybody would have followed suit. So what we want our comrades to benefit from is our knowledge with respect to health and safety, our knowledge with respect to industrial relations, how to deal with the multinationals and those global corporations and so on, how to get the best for their workers, and more importantly, to not have our comrades in Guyana doing menial work in the sector. So we want them to rise to the highest echelon in the industry and take their pride of place and to preside over their own resources, and so that they will have a greater sense of independence. And therefore, we, the OWTU and GAU, we have come together, we have agreed on a memorandum of understanding as to how we are going to share all of this knowledge and so on. And I also want to say that it's not just in trade union activities. Trade union activities and so on, they know about that. How to treat with collective agreement and to organize and to make sure that they get the best for the best, all of the classifications of workers, all of those things. But we also want to show our experience that we have, a wealth of experience that we have in the oil and gas sector, and especially in the winning of oil. The whole question of raising the bar and allowing our Guyanese comrades to take their pride of place at the higher levels in that sector, and not have the multinationals occupy those positions alone. The multinationals alone must not occupy those top positions and so on. Expatriates doing the jobs that the local can do. And so we will lend our experience and so on. We will share the technical knowledge where our Guyanese brothers can not just be rastabout and floor men and so on, or doing laboring or low-level work, but that the idea is for them to also become drillers and pushers and mud engineers and so on, tool pushers and so on, tower pushers, instrument technicians, mechanical technicians, pump technicians and so on, to be able to really reap the benefit of their own land. And that, my friends, is the idea between us coming together and collaborating and taking it a step further in actually signing a memorandum of understanding as to how we are going to execute that which I have just described. So let me turn you over now, give you an opportunity to hear from my brother, my comrade, Sipo Narayan, the president of GAU, the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union.
President General of the OWTU, friends of the media, the GAU is extremely pleased and happy to have reached this point in our relationship with the OWTU, whereby today we are going to be able to have a memorandum of understanding. First of all, I should let you know that the relationship between GAU and the OWTU dates back to many decades. Many leaders in our unions, before the common crop of both leaders from the two unions, we have had a relationship of solidarity and support. In fact, I recall in 1977, when the sugar workers had been on strike in Guyana for profit share, it was the OWTU that refused to handle any shipment that was going to Guyana until that matter would have been addressed and resolved. That was a great deal of solidarity between us. And that's just one example. We have had many examples and many other issues. In fact, since we formed our oil and gas branch in the GAU 1 year ago, we had been seeking the guidance from the OWTU. And they had been providing that all along. And we had been very grateful for that. We recognize that the industry is developing at a fast pace. And we also recognize that in the industry, many of the contractors who are supplying the labor force, they are not treating with workers decently. They are denying them their PPE, they're denying them overtime payments, they're denying them many other things that are in the law, even on your leave. So we decided that it has reached the point whereby we have to be able to step up our level of representation to the workers. That being so, we recognize that we are not fully knowledgeable of the issues in the sector. And the people who are the ones who are knowledgeable are the OWTU. They have been doing this business for 85 years as a union. And we recognize that from their history, when the union was first representing the workers in Trinidad and Tobago, they had the same problems that we are facing now. And therefore, we are very thankful for the OWTU for us to reach this level of collaboration. For the workers, we believe this is a glorious opportunity for them in Guyana. It allows us to extend our many years of militant representation and service to them with here another opportunity. An opportunity that brings to it the requisite knowledge and the requisite know-how. And there are many issues. The President General raised a few of those issues, things like occupational safety and health, and some of the technical aspects to it. And we are certain that this exercise, the signing of this memorandum, is going to allow us to deepen our relations and at the same time to provide further and much needed guidance to our union, which will redound to the benefit of the workers. And as a union over the years, we have a long history of standing up and defending workers. And this is just another step. And again, I want to repeat my thanks to the OWTU. We believe that with this year, workers will have another opportunity for them to be able to be respected and for them to be able to have decent working conditions. And we are ready and prepared to stand up and to take on that fight. Again, ladies and gentlemen of the media, I want to thank you very much for your coverage of this event. And OWTU, I want to thank you very much for our discussions. And during the discussions, before we have reached this stage, the General Secretary of the GAU and Comrade Ozzy of the OWTU, they have been having more of these conversations that has reached us to this point. So I just want to put that on record as an acknowledgement, and again to say thank you very much for being gentlemen.
Are there any questions?
Apologies, first of all, for arriving late. Can you give us a sense of the industrial climate in your country, government and union? Is it similar to what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago? How receptive are they to what it is you're doing and your representation of this new sector to Guyana?
With respect to the oil and gas sector, you have the difficulties because the labor is supplied by agencies and contractors. And in many cases, the employer is different from the people who give you instructions and the people who supervise you. The Ministry of Labor has been cooperative to some level, but there is up to a level that they can go. And in resolving issues of workers, one cannot depend on any Ministry of Labor, whether the government is friendly to the employees or not, because the direct contact has to be their union. And it is only unionization that could be able to take the workers out of their difficulties. And the OWTU would have had that experience too, had it not been for the union many issues and many standards in that sector would not have been a reality. So even though we had been talking to the Minister of Labor and we were able to have a number of matters resolved, it is not the answer. The answer is unionization. And we recognize that very clearly, and we are making efforts to have that happen.
And does your labor laws, your labor legislation lend itself to the union, representation?
Yes, we do have many strong labor laws that has the potential to protect the employees across the country. And some of those we sought the pattern from Trinidad and Tobago too. But more fundamentally, a law is there, but without the policing of it, and without the upholding of that law, it remains on paper. And I say this to demonstrate an example. Our Constitution, the country's Constitution, allows every employee to belong to a union of their choice. There is one of the oil companies that had in their contract that you are not allowed to join a trade union. As far as that, in violation of the Constitution. And in this sector, the employers and the operators who are there, from the time employees start to talk about a union, there is always those who are spying to say, we don't want union, we'll take care of you. We're a family. But this is just one of the many tactics that they would employ to tell workers that, don't worry with trade unions, that's not your business. But all of us who are trade unionists, from the OWTU and from GAU, we know that's not the answer. And as I said before, the only answer is being a member of a trade union of your choice. And in this case, it is only the GAU and the only union that is taking on this challenge to represent workers in that sector. And that is why it's part of our long-standing, to represent workers and to protect them and let them have a say. And that is why, recognizing the challenges in that sector, for employees to become members of the union, we have turned our help to the OWTU. And as I said before, the OWTU is not a union that is an overnight union, now coming into this business. They have 85 years of experience in representing workers in this sector. And from the time they started with their many great leaders, up to today, the union leadership of the OWTU has not failed their members. And history will record and show that. And one has to acknowledge that you're talking to people who are the real trade unions that could help the workers.
Mr. Ryan, Dennis Sproul, Demorales, wonderful here in Guyana. Sir, can you say what progress has been made in having that company allow its workers to be unionized? And what is the name of the company? And my second substantive question is, in coming up with the Memorandum of Understanding, what analysis was conducted of Guyana's relevant laws to the labor sector?
First of all, out of our representation, the Ministry of Labor ordered that company to remove the clause from its contract with employees. Sometimes it's not good to mention these names, but they are there on the history and the records of the Ministry of Labor. And the other point about the protection for the employees, So one, they are not freely allowed to associate with a trade union. That's the first point. And this is the trend throughout all the companies operating in Guyana. They are companies. The second point is that the labor law provides for PPE, occupational safety and health, and all the other things. But yet, there was another company that had in their contract the employees paying for their safety boots. And safety boots by law is a requirement to be provided by the employer. So then you had the question of annual leave too. Many of these matters, because we are not accredited as yet as the bargaining agent on behalf of the employees, we have to represent them and depend on the Ministry of Labor to address them. But while the ministry might be helpful, and we are happy that they are addressing issues when it is reported to them, they are not the answer, because they are not the people on the ground being the watchdog. They can only react to complaints that are being registered at the ministry. A trade union is there, will be there all the time, and will have the structure to represent issues as they arises within the grievance procedure.
What I was trying to get from you, Mr. Ryan, is whether in your analysis of the laws of Guyana, the relevant labor laws of Guyana, and those of Trinidad and Tobago, where if you had seen any gaps that should be filled here in Guyana, and if so, what are those gaps? So that the memorandum of understanding can be at a very practical level be considered one that is harmonized between the laws of Trinidad and the one of Guyana governing the oil sector. Well,
The Memorandum of Understanding is going to provide that opportunity for us, because here we will be able to, in a more concrete manner, to be able to examine conditions, to be able to examine the relevant laws, and of course, some of the issues are not in law, they might be in collective agreements, but this memorandum is what is going to charter that way forward, so that we could be able to have a greater understanding as to what exists between Trinidad and Tobago and what is there between Guyana. We know what is in the law in Guyana, but we have to be guided, and this memorandum will create that vehicle for us to move forward in that direction.
Sir, sorry if I'm kind of dominating the press conference at this stage, but I just really had to ask this one. Why are you protecting the name of the company that has been involved in violating workers' rights as you claim?
It's a fact that more than one company has been violating workers' rights. It's a fact that many of them spoke to us after we exposed it in the press, but it is not the right thing for me to, as yet, call the names of them. But they know who they are, and the ministry know who they are.
What is the size of the oil and gas branch, and in comparison to the size of, workers within the oil and gas sector that will remove the tax? But you're saying, getting membership is unknown to, be able to recognize, and represent them. So how much do you all have now, and how many you are looking forward to?
At the moment, we are in many sectors of the country, agriculture mainly, but we are in other sectors. So we have formed the oil and gas sector with a view to mobilizing these workers and to eventually become the bargaining agent. The law of the country requires 40% of the workforce to be members of the trade union, and then you could have an application to the certification list to become the bargaining agent. So we believe at this moment because of the fact that you have many young workers in that sector, we need to raise the level of consciousness. We need to let them understand what is the union for them. You know, sometimes people ask you, well, I don't have any difficulty, I don't have any problem, you know, why do I want a union? And the employees are wicked. They will go and they will spread all kinds of propaganda, but the union only wants you to pay, the union wants you to be like, you know, well, it's a bad word to say, like they're slaves and so on. But they will do that. And the question is, you know, you buy a new car. You don't expect to drive it down the road and make an accident. And the union is your insurance. In this case, your union is your insurance at the workplace should you run into any difficulty. The union is there to overlook what are your rights, even though it is in the law, and it is not being respected. The union is there to ensure that there is enforceability. Directly on your question, we haven't applied to be the certified bargaining agent as yet, because we don't believe that the level of consciousness among the workforce have reached that point. So this is where we are in the process of educating the employees to let them know what the union stands for, what the union can do for them, what are their rights and what are being violated. And after we would have reached that point where we believe that there is sufficient consciousness among the workers, then we will apply for certification.
But have you all, I mean, you all are not recognized majority, but have you all been trying to engage with the various companies about their policies? And what has been the feedback?
We had some discussions with a few of them. But many of them would prefer to think that we don't exist. Because, you know, if they give you recognition and start talking to you, it's telling the employees that, you know, you should go to our union. So they will avoid us as much as possible, as part of the big picture to keep away unions. But a few of them, after we expose them in the press, they talk to us and try to, you know, tell us that, look, the people who are, who they're supplying workers, they're not catering for safety boots, for PPE, and, you know, holiday with pay, and therefore we got to see with them from that side. But the answer always is what we got to do with that. If you are supplying labor, then you must know that the law requires you to have PPEs, overtime payment, annual leave, sick leave, pay the people NIS. You know, many employers, they will deduct the social security contribution and they don't pay it in. And then when the employees reach a certain age, they find, oh my God, it wasn't paid. So, you know, these are things that a union has to be there to police these things. Ministry of Labor can't do it.
Are these local foreign companies? Are these illegal suppliers?
No. Many of them are locals. They have these agencies set up directly for that. And you have also some foreign.
Question from Guyana. David?
Hi, Dave. Good morning. This is Sibal, President General. Good morning. Following up on the same issue there that you just spoke about, where you have these third-party agents being the employers of the employees for the sector. Have you guys been able to get any discussions with Trinidad Union as to how you could address this issue?
We have had discussions with the Trinidad Union because initially they had faced the very issue. But we have reached the point now where we would be able, in a better way, in a more organized way, to address these issues. Because while we had been talking to the OWTU, it's obviously one of the issues that had to be discussed, because it's one where there is this third party, there is the hidden employer, and someone is employing you, you are being posted somewhere to work and being supervised by other people. So, for instance, you may have on the rig, you may have myself being employed by one agency, Aslim being employed by an agency, President General being employed by another agency, but we are all working together doing the same job, being supervised by the same people, but we have different employers. It's a very meticulous way of keeping out the union from representing the employees. It makes it more difficult that you have to, you can't seek to be the bargaining agent from the people who are supervising. You have to be the bargaining agent on behalf of the people who employ you. So if we have 3 employers employing 3 of us, working side by side, relieving each other because we are doing the same job, we still have different employers.
President General, could you offer any light as to how you guys, if this was a situation in Trinidad, and how you would have handled it?
Yeah, well, it goes back to what the President was talking about, the whole question of raising the consciousness of workers. Because for workers to, first of all, recognize that individualism is where the exploitation will take place. And therefore, collective action, collective organizing is the answer to that. Understanding that you and me and John and Jim, we are doing the same job, but there are different remuneration applied to different persons. And therefore, there's where the exploitation comes in. So it has to be, first of all, from the ground up, building consciousness and having workers understand not just their right, but their worth. And therefore, in that regard, prepared to take a stand with their union, to take a particular type of collective action to demand what is due to them. And that's quite apart from the law, because the law in different jurisdictions supports that. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, we come full circle, because unlike your Ministry of Labor, ours is dead. So we still envy the Guyanese workers whose Ministry of Labor would at least intervene and resolve some of those issues. But we are at the point where our Minister of Labor has nothing to do or does not resemble labor at all. It's asleep. Yeah? So it has to do with organizing the sector and understanding the value of that sector, both on an individual level and a collective level, the value to the economy. And therefore you ought to be treated a particular type of way.
One last question for you, Ms. Murray. You talked about the OWTU's experience. And part of the OWTU's experience over the years, when they feel like they're not being treated fairly in discussions, is to shut things down.
Collective action.
Yeah, but when that doesn't go according to plan,
But always,
is that something that you think?
always a union doesn't worth its salt if it cannot organize joint collective action, if it can't tell a strike when things go wrong. Always a union you have to talk, you have to allow the process to take place, but at some time, employers ought to understand that you're not going to talk us out all the time. And if you don't have the ability to have joint collective actions, because strike is a bad word, and then you don't want your salt as being used. And this is where always you have to be able to stand in defense of your members. And over the years, Trinidad history is rich with the OWTU being on the streets.
Right, so the question is, do you think your union, your new partnership will be able to take that type of action?
When the time comes, we will determine that. We cannot rule it out.
Yeah.
It's always one of the options.
And certainly, to more precisely the question, it's all about the training, development, and the building of consciousness, right? Because workers have to understand the value of their input. And therefore, if the value of my input is X, and somebody else extract all of that value, and I'm not being compensated, then something is wrong with that. And therefore, we are not back on the plantation, we are not in slavery, and therefore it's only slavery that you will put out your labor and not be properly paid for it. We are in modern times. Therefore, we are saying there are a lot we can contribute to showing the Commonwealth how these multinationals, even though they changed name, and it's 2022, it's the same face, the same intention, as far back as 85 years ago. They come to your shores, they extract your resources, and they leave your people pauperized. Ours is the position that experience that we would have gone through, we don't want such a long learning curve for the Commonwealth. We want them to quickly begin to benefit, and they must be able to take the pride of place in the economy, which their God-given economy for the Guyanese people. Workers and the people must benefit from the resources of their land. And those persons who are working in the sector and who put their lives at risk ought to be treated in a special way. And we say that without apology. Yeah?
Is there room for the OWTU to be part of any sort of negotiations for collective bargaining agreements with oil companies?
No, we're not outside the jurisdiction because that wouldn't work, which is why we will give the Commonwealth and the necessary advice and share our experiences with them. And of course, they being a trade union of long standing will quickly understand and learn and to be able to use these tools against these modern day, what we call modern day masses, European companies and so on. You will find us being a little bit more abrasive in our language because of our dealings with them then, and now we know them. Yeah, and which is why they will choose the different jurisdictions and countries to go where they believe the laws are softer or where comrades do not know their rights. And we are prepared to arm fully our comrades of Guyana with the type of ammunition to be able to deal with those multinational A lot of things are happening, and we do not want to have a repeat of what took place earlier this year, where lives are lost as a result of keeping trade unions out. The government of Trinidad and Tobago now, Keith Rowley and his government called IMBO and this non-minister of labor, they would prefer not have trade unions around. And as they would, if they are allowed to have their way, workers are the ones that are going to suffer, not only in terms of remuneration, pay, and terms and conditions, but in terms of their lives. 4 workers died in that company because, one, those who were in the management and who are still in the management the only qualification to be there are the friends of the government and the friends of the Prime Minister. And secondly, of course, because there wasn't a union to point out the rights to those workers. So they have come around now to understand this is not just a question of money, it's a question of life and death. And therein provides another opportunity for us to quickly organize workers. So you'll be exploited, paid very little, and you will not be able to spend what you are paid because you will be 6 feet under. That is the level of exploitation that is taking place. And it provides an opportunity, and certain things are happening, and very soon you will be able to see that demonstrated in a most fundamental way. We are prepared to use this system. This system has failed because those who regulate the system, our Minister of Labor and so on, is dereliction of duty, but we are prepared nonetheless to use the system. We are prepared to use the courts and the courtyard to ensure that workers get justice. Yeah. So,
And do you see a correlation? And prior to the last general election, there would have been an offer to the OWTU to bid for the refinery. I'm seeing that we have a local election coming up soon, and there is an offer to turn to MTAP. Do you see that as being a card that they're dangling with the trade unions again because of the election?
yes, it's a lot of Mama Guy, and the trade union movement has spoken extensively on that issue and totally rejected out of hand any Mama Guy attempt to come back to ENTAC, which ENTAC never functioned in the first place. Any organization and or entity which a trade union is involved and it does not benefit its members, that trade union ought not to be part of that. Okay? Yes, so we have this very important sign here this morning. We want to that is, that on Labor Day, many thousands of workers, both in Faizabad and in Scarborough, signed a motion of no confidence in the government and its administration. So going back to MTAP is not on our agenda at all.
What's
Oh yes. Not to overshadow Cape at all, but coincidentally, the Secretariat of CARICOM is also in Guyana. They are making efforts to do the last delivery, that is to deliver that motion of no confidence to the Secretariat of CARICOM. You cannot have a government treating its people bad dereliction of duty, brutalizing its citizens and so on, decimating, attempting to decimate trade unions, and then presents itself as acolyte in the region and elsewhere. They must know that it's an abusive relationship with the government of Trinidad and Tobago and its people, wherever they go to masquerade or to Manalai people. And therefore, it's not that we expect the CARICOM Secretariat to fix the problem, but they must be aware of the problem. And so that is what we are about, exposing Israel and the PNM government. And so the trade union movement is going to decide on a date and a medium by which we are going to do that today. Remember, we went to Tobago, it was 2 weeks ago, and we got overwhelming support. And let me thank the Chief Secretary for the support that he would have given the trade union movement as we embark on that journey to tell everybody that we, the workers and the trade union movement, have produced, signed and produced a no confidence motion Keith Rowley and his government.
Also,
the president, the opposition leader, the president of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, they will also serve the Chief Secretary, and that was the Caribbean Secretary of the Senate. And then all of their minions and their scribes, let me just say that they are the ones that hold in the country at ransom. Keith Rowley, sycophants and the scribes, they are the ones that hold in the country at ransom. Treat people with respect, treat workers with dignity, and so on, and allow them to get what is due to them. And you will find you have very little challenges in governing. Do the opposite, and what is going to happen next will happen to you. Take a sign,
Perfect.